Hare Krishna.
Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should first offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Sarasvati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva Thakur. Srimvatam Swakata Krishna,
Srimvatam Sakata Krishna,
Punya Shravana Kirtana, Vidyantastomya Bhadrani, Vidunoti Suhritsatam, Shri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is the Paramatma, super soul in everyone's heart, and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee, who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. Nashta Preshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental established as an irrevocable fact. So I still have to read those verses here and there. It's easy to read the sins from this things.
So today's text 22, right?
Today, yeah, we're reading from Bhagavatam,
22.
Canto 1, Chapter 17, Text 22. That's not correct. But since I arrived so late, I couldn't change it. So, and somebody else didn't arrive at all, who usually writes it. So, these things happen. So we have, so let's see. Just got it, I'll just read it real slowly, and somebody might have it in their phone anyways. So Raja Vacha Dharmam Bravishi Dharma Gya Dharmam Bravishi Dharma Gya Dharmo Si Vrisha Rupa Drik Dharmo Si Vrisha Rupa Drik Yad Adharma Krita Stanam Yad Adharma Krita Stanam Suchakasyapi Tat Bhavet Suchakasyapi Tat Bhavet. So for those who have on their phones, we'll proceed this way, like usual. Raja Vacha Dharmam Bravishi Dharmakya Dharmo Si Vrisharupa Drik Yad Adharma Kritastanam Suchakasyapi Tat Bhavet Rajavacha Dharmam Bravishi Dharmakya Dharmo Si Vrisharupa Drik Yad Adharma Kritastanam Suchakasyapi Tat Bhavet. Rajavacha Dharmam Bravishi Dharmakya Dharmasi Vrisharupadrik Yad Adharma Kritastanam Suchakasyapi Tat Bhavet.
I left my phone.
Oh, you had your phone.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just got to put my glasses on for one second.
Oh, okay. I was like looking at your phone.
John is pretty good in chanting.
Thank you. Rajavacha Dharmam Bhavisiddha Manjana Dharma Shri Visarupadek Yada Dharma Krita Stanam Suchakasyapi Tat Bhavet.
I looked down and I looked up and Goku mentioned it has vanished. I looked down and looked up, he's gone. I didn't see the event, but somehow he managed to disappear. I wish I'd seen it. Pretty impressive. Okay, word meanings. Uvacha. The king said. Dharmam. Religion. Bravishi. As you speak. Dharmagya,
Dharmagya,
O one who knows the codes of religion.
O one who knows the codes of religion.
Dharma,
Dharma,
the personality of religion.
the personality of religion.
Asi,
Asi,
you are.
you are.
Vrisharupadrik,
Visharupadrik,
in the disguise of a bull.
in the disguise of a bull.
Yet,
Yat,
whatever.
whatever.
Adharma kritaha,
Adama Kritaha,
one who acts irreligiously.
one who acts irreligiously.
Stanam,
Stanam,
place.
place.
Suchakasya,
Suchakasya,
of the identifier.
of the identifier.
Api,
Api,
also.
also.
Tat,
Tat,
that.
that.
Bhavet,
Bhavet,
becomes.
becomes.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
The king said, oh, no, I like to read the whole thing first, get the idea, and then because my way of listening is, I miss things, and so then I go back and, oh, that's, I go part by part, so that works better. Everybody has a different way. The king said, you who are in the form of a bull, you know the truth of religion, and you are speaking according to the principle that the destination intended for the perpetrator of irreligious acts is also intended for one who identifies the perpetrator. You are no other than the personality of religion. So please repeat now. The king said,
The king said,
O you who are in the form of a bull,
O you who are in the form of a bull,
you know the truth of religion.
you know the truth of religion,
And you are speaking according to the principle
and you are speaking according to the principle
that the destination intended for the perpetrator of irreligious acts.
that the destination intended for the perpetrator of irreligious acts.
For the destination intended for the perpetrator of irreligious acts.
Destination intended for the perpetrator of irreligious acts.
I just see how long the phrase can be used, okay. Is also intended.
Is also intended
For one who identifies a perpetrator.
for one who identifies as a perpetrator.
You are no other than the personality of religion.
You know the personality of religion.
Okay, purport. A devotee's conclusion is that no one is directly responsible for being a benefactor or mischief monger without the sanction of the Lord. Therefore, he does not consider anyone to be directly responsible for such action. But in both cases, he takes it for granted that either benefit or loss is God-sent, and thus it is his grace. In case of benefit, no one will deny that it is God-sent. But in case of loss or reverses, one becomes doubtful about how the Lord could be so unkind to his devotee as to put him in great difficulty. Jesus Christ was seemingly put into such great difficulty, being crucified by the ignorant, but he was never angry at the mischief mongers. That is the way of accepting a thing, either favorable or unfavorable. Thus, for a devotee, the identifier is equally a sinner, like the mischief monger. By God's grace, the devotee tolerates all reverses. Maharaj Parikshit observed this, and therefore he could understand that the bull was no other than the personality of religion itself. In other words, a devotee has no suffering at all, because so-called suffering is also God's grace for a devotee who sees God in everything. The cow and bull never placed any complaint before the king for being tortured by the personality of Kali, although everyone lodges such complaints before the state authorities. The extraordinary behavior of the bull made the king conclude that the bull was certainly the personality of religion, for no one else could understand the finer intricacies of the codes of religion. He was born in the darkest of ignorance. The spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge to offer my respectful obeisances unto him. So this is such an interesting section of the Bhagavatam here. It's got so many levels to it. It's interesting that the cow and bull didn't lodge any complaint. But then, Parikshit Maharaj was right there. Parikshit Maharaj was ready to punish it's also a religious principle that the Kshatriya should punish the miscreant in order to keep order in society. So there appears to be contradictions here, but there aren't. And that's the hard part to understand. Like we keep talking about this contradiction that the king is ready to kill the personality of Kali, and the bull congratulates him. And the king asks the bull to name the culprit, and the bull won't name the culprit, saying you can't say for sure who is doing it. And the king congratulates him. And then the king goes ahead without any doubt or hesitation and is prepared to kill the personality of Kali. So, is this like schizophrenic or it's not schizophrenic? It all makes sense, but it's on a very deep level. So it's explaining in this purport how the I'm sorry, I'm getting slightly sick, so I'm sort of slow-brained. And that's why we're here later than I intended to be too. It's like I'm slightly sick. So struggling here, but.
So are you blaming the germs?
I'm blaming
Who do you fault?
Chris's mercy.
Chris's mercy, only have my Chris's. Actually, that's interesting because yesterday Amanda Ganesh came and said it's because that people come for a festival and they leave their sins. It's a holy place and they come and they leave more purified. So they leave their sins here. Like we read about that in the holy places, right? So this is a holy place. So we have a big festival, and after that everybody's wiped out and kind of unfocused and has fights with each other. And so...
She timed that just for you to walk in.
So maybe it's because we got extra load of sins around here, and we're kind of not used to this extra burden, but by continued devotional service, it goes away. Another thing people leave and drop off is their germs, and another thing, it just takes a lot of energy, and so we're actually tired. We're generally physically tired, which I made to point out back to him, because he was like saying, well, it's just people's sins. Well, we also worked really hard and got tired. So I made sure to point that out in return.
Can I just say one thing about that?
Okay.
Because it just relates right there. One time I was mentioning to Pataka Maharaj about karma from cycles, and he said, yes, but I also get all the benefit from the spiritual advancement. So when these people came, they may have committed offenses, but they also were making a lot of spiritual benefit. So simultaneously, we made a lot of benefit.
That's good to say, yeah. I thought it's a little discouraging unless you have a solution like that. Yeah, it balances, because we also, although immediately we might not feel it because we're physically tired and we are, this atmosphere is a little different around here. So we have to proceed with our devotional service, I guess, but on the long run, lots of benefit, yes. Lots and lots of benefit. Otherwise, we couldn't do it year after year. So, anyways, that was interesting. So anyways, my brain's a little slow. Sorry. So people want to credit God when something good happens because they like to believe God is good. So when I credit God when something good happens, unless you're an atheist, you're willing to credit God. This is from God. So a good thing happens, but what if something really bad happens? And so then we have a lot more trouble. This fell off me, didn't it? Was this on me? Yeah, well, it's all right. We have a lot of trouble if something bad happens. We really have to wrestle with ourselves to understand that Krishna sent it as purification to help us. But that's always the case, that nothing happens without the sanction of the Lord. So whatever happens. So we had some interesting discussions on this, of course, a couple of days, or at least one day, but we've had interesting discussions about what's the cause and who's the cause and all that. And we've discussed some really bad things happening and so on. And so I can't keep a train of thought with it done. Anyway, I went home after one of these discussions and I wrote several pages in my notebook. And I'm going to read it pretty much just as I wrote it because I fell out pretty much in order at several pages. And, but it goes pretty fast. Don't be scared. But, so I looked at a lot of different angles, so don't make too much reaction before it's done, and then we'll discuss it. So some things might persons might want to react. Okay, so Srimad Bhagavatam 1:17 chapter. Parikshit Maharaj promises punishment. Dharma congratulates him because Parikshit is worthy, like the Pandavas, and empowered by Krishna and can do it. But Parikshit asks Dharma, who did this? Dharma says, hard to ascertain because so many theories and so many factors, and whoever accuses the perpetrator shares the fate. But Parikshit congratulates him. Actually, Parikshit said it. Didn't he? Yeah. Anyway, Parikshit congratulates him, identifies him as Dharma, personality of religion. So who's right? A dilemma. Two pure devotees, two opposite opinions. So don't forget, there are two pure devotees here. Two opposite opinions, apparently opposite opinions. And neither one of them says, I'm wrong and you are right, but both congratulate each other and accept each other. Punish perpetrator or don't ID him? This is the question. In case of abuse, it's especially difficult when it's abuse of children. That was one of the things we talked about. Especially sexual. There is anger, hurt, fear of all kinds of feelings and damage to externals like body and mind, damage to the proper order of society, all of which has to be heard and dealt with and healed in practical ways. There needs to be justice, yet the personality of religion has refused to identify his obvious abuser. Is justice not a part of religion? Of course it is. We see that the personality of religion has congratulated the dispenser of justice for his determination to punish. So what is the deeper meaning? When the abused kids are told, it's your karma, they're outraged and write books about it, understandably. But in sympathy, or attempt at empathy, and in guilt, the perpetrators have not been punished adequately or properly. In sympathy or temperature. Oh, there's sympathy, there's attempt at empathy, and there's guilt feelings, but still, I know guilt because the perpetrators have not been punished adequately or properly. The devotees around have supported a victim culture, not saying the very real feelings should be denied. Like when someone dies, we're told not to lament, but we're not told not to grieve. And I looked up those two words and they're not different enough, but that concepts are different. Of course we feel a loss, the concepts in the context. Of course we feel a loss when we lose someone's association. There is a natural feeling of sadness and pain. It's okay and good to grieve in that sense. But lamenting in the sense of to bewail fate, to cry out, why did this happen, and fight accepting it, is not good. Similarly, when there has been abuse, that means one's life has been forcefully changed. A load of bad memories have been dumped into one's life to deal with, even though they were not planned on. There's anger for that. There's fear, because helplessness was experienced and pain was delivered out of the blue, and deep embarrassment about the body. Sex is so sensitive and loaded a subject that even rape can make a person doubt oneself. Maybe I enjoyed it, or maybe I wanted it. Even forced rape can do that, so a person has to fight the pressure to feel guilty on top of it all. These are real feelings, just like sadness is a real feeling. One did not want these feelings, but here they are anyway, and one has to honestly feel them and work through them, maybe with help. Another feeling, things are not right. Justice is needed. Order should be restored into a chaotic situation. And the proper government should deliver that justice. Justice restores order. Justice restores faith in right and wrong. Justice helps bring closure. Punishment is not for revenge. That is why the Brahmanas guide the Kshatriyas and teach principles of religion, so Kshatriyas don't punish for revenge or out of lower modes of false ego. Punishment should be swift, correct, and strong as a deterrent, and to rid society of troublemakers. Punishment also frees the perpetrator from that karma. It's a mercy in a way. But what about the deeper meaning? What about karma? If it's karma, is it just the victim's fault? Is that blame or a cop-out? Or is it even just karma? So many factors, modes, conditioning, karma of both victim and perpetrator. Personality of religion says there are so many causes. But punish the doer, who is the doer? So I brought this up, Bhagavad Gita 3, I didn't look it up. The one that says, the bewildered soul is under the influence of the modes of nature, thinks himself the doer of what is under the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of what was done by the modes of nature. So who's the doer really? And in Bhagavad 18, there's in chapter 8, there's a verse, 5 factors of action, near the beginning of it. So, can abuse really hurt anyone? Only by illusion. We are eternal spirit souls. We can't be harmed or changed by any weapon. We are souls covered by subtle and gross bodies made of matter. Abuse can only harm the subtle and or gross body, which is just material energy. We take harm when we have somehow been persuaded to identify with the bodies. We forget our real identity. Abuse can overwhelm and make us forget our real self. Isn't that the ultimate reality of the effects of abuse? That it shows we've let someone essentially make us fools identifying with the body and mind again? We naturally get self-righteous to avoid seeing this. Only the matter around us has been affected. Matter can't be hurt, only changed around. Souls can't be hurt unless they believe the illusion. It's all illusion, ultimately. The illusion becomes stronger when abuse has overwhelmed intelligence, and we need to find our way out again. But the material world is all a place of misery wherein birth and death take place. Are not birth and death themselves abuse, affecting our minds and bodies, creating unwanted emotional effects? Between birth and death, so many unpleasant, unwanted, even horrific events, marking the subtle body with conscious and unconscious memories again and again. Envious, illusion, living entities with various coverings over a pure soul's knowledge attack one another all the time. Some are wild animals that try to eat you. Some are thieves that try to steal your stuff. Some are murderers. Some are con artists or manipulating sociopaths. Some are sex abusers that try to steal their enjoyment from you. Accidents happen and maim you. Weather and economic disaster can destroy your home, make you homeless and vulnerable. Some are physical abusers and spill their anger on you. Some are terrible disease germs. It's a place of suffering. Our challenge, our human duty, is we have to transcend our material illusion and know that we are souls. The victim culture helps keep victims stuck in the feelings they got when the abuse overwhelmed their true spiritual knowledge. The feelings are real and need to be worked through in practical ways, but the ultimate goal is not to perpetuate the victim culture, but to reestablish the knowledge of the soul. The abuser should be properly punished to protect society. Let's see. Oh, this is very tiny. Punishment without philosophy punishment without philosophy and empathy equals reading wrong. Tiny scribbles here. Punishment with philosophy and empathy equals restorative justice and healing in society. Punishment without philosophy or empathy equals a lynching culture. Philosophy and empathy without punishment equals dissatisfaction in society that continues. Sympathy and empathy without philosophy equals sentimentality and victim culture. So, does that all make sense? That was the end of what I wrote. That we have to, just because an abuse is really, really overwhelming doesn't change that person from an eternal spirit soul who is capable of rising above it. So sometimes we are so emotionally reactive to it, and the victim, of course, is, that we forget that the goal is they're an eternal spirit soul. The energy of Krishna can't be harmed. So the higher energy can't be harmed, the soul can't be harmed or changed. The lower energy can't be harmed, but it can be changed all around. And so the abuse doesn't harm Krishna's energy. The subtle body and the gross body are just made of Krishna's energy. It just gets changed. In chapter 13 of the Bhagavad Gita, somewhere around 20, is a verse that says that effects of material nature come from material energy, changes of material nature come from material energy, suffering and enjoyment come from the living entity. So that comes from the illusion. The living entity is so attached, trying to enjoy and finding these horrible things happening. Lots of different kinds of horrible things can happen. And the suffering happens because the living entity is attached. So the ultimate goal, not to skim over abuses, that's like it dumps a whole bunch of dirt in your house. If somebody backed up a dump truck full of dirt and dumped it in your house, You wouldn't like push it into the corners and put furniture in front of it. You have to remove it outdoor the proper way. So that's a therapist's duty. When some bad things happen and a person is stuck in it, the therapist helps clean it up, and that has to be done. You can't just say, well, we're not going to do that. It has to be done. But still, we have to understand it. We're not the dirt. We're not the house that got dumped in. We're not now forever, identified as people whose house had dirt in it. We clean it out. And we still remain the human being living in the house. Same thing with the soul in the body when there's some kind of abuse. Like here, the cow and the bull are beaten on the legs and the bull's legs are cut off. And the cow is suffering so much deprivation. So all this is terrible suffering, and it certainly marks the subtle body and the gross body. And but the point is that we are eternal spirit souls, and that's the object and the goal of all healing, to understand that. So Parikshit Maharaj knows that he still is going to do his duty, because you still have to clean it up. You still have to clean up the mess, and you have to make it stop. And they put up no more dump trucks can come in here and dump, some kind of protection against dump trucks. And you have to clean the dirt out, and all the corners and everything, you have to make it nice and clean again. This is practical. So this is, the king does this kind of stuff. But he's not in opposition to the philosopher, the prince who studies the principles of religion and knows the inner meaning of everything, and knows how to not identify the perpetrator. I think it's in the next verse. No, it says in this one. Also intended for the one who identifies the perpetrator. So the one who identifies the perpetrator is in the same material condition. Not that you get, because somebody murders somebody, and you say he's the murderer, all of a sudden you got to go get hanged also. No, not in that sense, but in the purport you can see it, because he still gets a material destiny, he still continues to get karma and so on. The same as the perpetrator does, because just identifying the perpetrator doesn't put you any higher. It doesn't put you spiritual. So you have to have the philosophical understanding, or you're going to be in the same level. So that's my understanding. So I will stop now and let everybody start howling and arguing. But no. Okay. No, really.
No.
Anybody have anything? Any comments? Oh, yes. Okay. Shri Krishna too, though. I think you were first, and then.
It was said that the most violent thing we could do to someone is to stop their spiritual advancement. And so if you kill someone, knock them out of that body, they're not the body, they're not the mind, they're the soul. If you knock that soul out of that body, you have stopped that person's spiritual advancement in this life. Because you've taken that, you've changed their life. You haven't taken their life. You moved them to the next body. But that stops their spiritual advancement. So that's a violent thing. It's also violent to, I'm going to give this person this Bhagavad. No, I'm not going to give this person this Bhagavad Gita. They can go to whatever. I'm not going to give them spirituality. I'm not going to share Krishna consciousness with this person. That's violent too.
Maybe, but that might be because that person is not going to be receptive.
Well, that's a different thing.
What's the real story that you're talking about?
If you judge it
that way. If you do it out of envy or resentment or something, if you kill somebody. But if you say because somebody is offensive and not really receptive, then you should not give it good.
Yeah, that's being sort of wise.
Yeah,
because they may cause more offense.
Yeah, and so you're avoiding an offense by not preaching the glories of the Lord to the faithless. So.
Right.
So, Prisha, did you have something? Did your hand go up, or you just?
Yeah, my hand was up. It's part where we're talking abusiveness, and I'm afraid of how I understand it or more. But what I remember was when I was in Lake Huntington, and I could see all these little girls, and they were like forced to do things, and you could see how much they had attachment for their family and loved ones and everything like that. So when I see that, it's hard for me to understand, okay, well, that's what they're meant to be, that's what Prabhupada wanted. And when there was such a lack of maturity with the teachers and everything. Like I saw this one video how this one girl, she was chastised for doing something in the temple room, and then the teacher put her in a room or something, and then later on Prabhupada was going through it, and he went to exactly where that room was. So things like that, I know this lifetime I'm gonna, that's how I was.
Yeah. Well, some of these bad things, all happens by the sanction of the Lord, so if a bad thing happens, somehow, and Krishna is always for our benefit, so somehow, even if really, really bad things happen, that might be their opportunity to take advantage of a little boost, to be a little turned off about the whole material thing, and just focus on Krishna more. So it might actually, we can't say what Krishna's doing, but yeah.
Some temples have ombudsman, I think it's, and they don't judge, but they help devotees that have enmity or arguments and strife. They help, are offended, either knowingly or unknowingly. They help devotees work things out. But this restorative justice, that's something new in grade schools even, that we didn't have when we were kids. You had bullies.
What is it?
Restorative justice.
There's
always been restorative. All justice is supposed to be restorative ultimately, but
I guess
they
didn't title it this, but it's actually a special study.
So what is it that they make somebody make up for it somehow? What is it exactly?
Instead of just, now say I'm sorry.
Not that.
Yeah. They actually figure out how to really balance what would satisfy the victim.
Well, actually, that's the Srimad Bhagavatam way.
Exactly.
Because if somebody offends somebody, they don't just go and say, I'm sorry, now you have to forgive me because I said I'm sorry. This is what the Christians have this idea from Jesus saying, forgive your brother. So now if somebody makes an offense, you can just go and say, if you make an offense, you can go and say, I'm sorry, please forgive me. And then all of a sudden the person who's offended has the burden of forgiving you and doesn't feel better. So in the Bhagavatam, you have to actually make up for it. You have to actually satisfy the person that you offended.
So if somebody takes your wife, then they should give you another wife.
What?
That's what I said. You heard me.
Well, you might have to do an awful lot of making up for something like that. I might give you another wife.
Don't get it.
Let's go there somehow. I have no idea. I can't think of a story in the Bhagavatam where somebody took somebody's wife. They gave somebody another wife. That's crazy. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but anyway.
Well, but the point is that the karma would be if someone, did steal someone's wife, which is actually legitimate in our society. It's not like the Vedic civilization and divorce and I was actually told once that adultery is not considered wrong in the eyes of the courts. You're not, engaging in adultery is not grounds for,
It's not a crime anymore.
But there's also like the children's taking care of the children and so on.
Custody.
Yeah, custody. So, but Vedically, if someone does these things, then there are reactions in the next life.
Yeah.
There will be reactions unless, in my mind, is, because I've meditated on this a lot, is that if the person understands what they did was wrong, and then they sincerely ask for forgiveness, that person they did it to forgives them, then everything's fine. Okay. And that person should forgive them if there's, if it's a genuine request for forgiveness.
Usually he has to say it in such a way that the person really is satisfied.
But the point is they have to feel, you have to, in other words, the person has to feel that this person understands what they did was wrong. If they don't understand what they did was wrong, then you can't give them forgiveness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they should do something to show their sincerity, if possible. Usually in the stories, it seems like they do something to show their sincerity. Yeah, it seems like. I can't think of a specific though.
In conjunction with what he was saying, every individual is so different, I personally, I would find very difficult, that's just me, to forgive somebody who stole my husband or something, It'll take me a long time, I don't know, I'm just me, I'm honest, so it's hard to superficially say, yeah, forgive you, it's okay, It hurts, it takes time. They might forgive, but they cannot forget, so what's the use? So, even in the Vedic times, you hear, even now, and for instance, that incident yesterday, this person was saying, if this happens in India, I'll beat this person up, So they go to that extent. Several other things I want to mention. You mentioned, thank you for finishing the class 5 minutes before, even. It's 8:15 right now. It was 5 minutes before.
Well, last I heard that 8:30 was the end time.
I know, but you finished.
No, I opened up for discussion.
Yeah,
It might go on, who knows?
Another thing I was going to say is, you said something last week about when something happened, they bring it to the authorities or something. That person has to give the right, the right judgment or answer, That I find it extremely difficult to do. They drag me into something sometimes. You listen to this and say, you almost have to be like a perfect person, you see both sides wrong and you can't say it and you try to calm people down, it just doesn't help,
Yeah, that's why
it's very difficult. That task is so hard. I mean, I've been here for 30-something years, Sometimes they want me to take sides and do these things, or I just can't do it, because I don't feel right about that.
That's why they have the saintly king under the guidance of the Brahmanas. So we're not saintly kings. That's why it's hard.
Then me and my husband totally will talk about that subject. We both don't agree with what, we both have different answers for that, He feels this way, I feel this way, and it's like, it's very difficult. And then lastly, I read last night or this morning, 6:25 I think, about the sparrow and how it lost its eggs. I think it's 6:25 Bhagavad-gita. That story really is really good, it helps about determination. And everybody knows about that story, about the sparrow losing the egg and Garuda comes. And we have to, like Krishna said, we have to be very determined and enthusiastic about our service, our sadhana, and if you are strong in all these things, quarrels and fights, you must know what to do, You calm down because you have Krishna conscious in you know what is the right thing to do. When you see so extreme anger everywhere, it's a very lack of Krishna conscious, I feel, that you're not understanding, this is Krishna's place, Krishna conscious katha is important, attending programs is important, at least some of it, if you don't do any of these steps, every little thing becomes like it's a big thing, it's a small thing, but it becomes like a big blow up, That's my realization.
Something happened yesterday. I heard yelling. We heard yelling about sunset. Some late yesterday. Some yelling we heard all the way down to the bus. But we didn't. Was that the event you're talking about?
No.
I don't know what else happened that evening.
No.
But it's all okay now. Everything's fine.
But can I respond to something Krishna Shaya said prior to this discussion? Although this discussion, I think, needs to continue at certain levels, but what he was saying about it's hard to give. When you said also not preaching to the faithless, but there's a Gyata Sukriti where we trick them by giving them prashadam or we engage them, even though we know they don't. You may not want to give them the Bhagavad Gita because you know they're going to throw it away. But get them to say, even if they say it in a cynical, even maybe offensive way, say Hare Krishnas. Well, Prabhupada said that's great. Prabhupada, there was the several incidences where devotees talk about how they thought the reporter was getting everything right, and Prabhupada took so much time and trouble to explain everything, and then that person just, blasted us. And Prabhupada said, well, how many times did he say Hare Krishna in the article? And they would count, and he said, this was a good article. Even though it was completely off the point. But he was saying, then the Hare Krishna say this, and the Hare Krishna said that. These Hare Krishnas, the Prabhupada said they're saying Hare Krishna. That's great advertisement.
It's sort of like the fisherman is out there killing fish, but he touched the body of Lord Chaitanya, and he couldn't stop saying Hari 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 Hari.
Yeah. So you get people to say Hare Krishna.
Yeah.
That's in also the Chandkazi story where the Mohammedans are complaining, the Brahmins are complaining because they don't want the mantra to be taught to the lower classes. But the Muslims are complaining because they were making fun of them, and now they can't stop saying Hare Krishna. They can't stop chanting. That was their complaint.
So do something about
So
it.
what kind of, some kind of, tantric, black magic. They got me. Only it's white magic.
Yeah.
Are you running some other?
Yes, I saw your hand.
Just like I wasn't privy to the discussion, so I don't know if this is relevant at all. But someone was asking my Guru Maharaj about when he was giving Facebook Live classes before the surgery about anartha nivritti, getting rid of unwanted things, and he said there's 3 things you should do. You should pray. You can consult your spiritual master. I mean, in that sense, even like to see what Prabhupada says about it. And then also he said, if you've made a mistake, go back and correct it. So, if that's pretty self-explanatory. So if you have, something with somebody, before you can progress in devotional service, by getting rid of those unwanted things, you have to go back and make amends. And then I remember reading about making an apology. Like there's a certain way to do it. Like it's best to look at the person, actually eye contact, connect with them, and then really avoid saying this sounds like a no-brainer, but I've done it before. I'm sorry, but...
I was thinking you were going to say but.
And then, but why do you have to aggravate me all the time? Or it has to be sincere. It has to be you're connecting with that person. And then hopefully they will forgive you. But I did hear him say long, long ago that if you're in a situation where somebody just will not forgive you, that you should go and find their shoes and take the dust from your shoes of that person. So, just some food for thought.
I've seen Mother Harigani do that many times, so I can vouch for you.
I didn't hear.
No, I've seen you asking for forgiveness, straightforwardly, like what she's saying.
Another thing is people that it's their nature to hold things. Like I have people in my family like this that hold things. It's difficult for them to just let it go, and it's difficult for them to accept an apology from somebody that is 5 minutes after they do something, they realize, I'm such a fool. And then they may say, approach that person and they say they're sorry. So if somebody is of the nature that it's difficult for them to let go, they don't think that that's very sincere. If you can just right away, okay, yeah, it's easy enough for you, which it may not be. Or there's different people with different mentalities and different consciousness that we have to consider all this because we're not impersonalists. What does this person require is real meditation.
No, I just sort of fill you in my theme, my main point of the class. I had a main point, and it was about how things that people do, harmful things that people do to each other, or in this case to the animals or whatever it is, it cannot harm. What can it harm? Because it cannot harm the spirit soul. Spirit soul cannot be changed or harmed by any weapon or killed. And then around the spirit soul is the subtle body and the gross body, made of Krishna's lower energy. And it's Krishna's lower energy. It can't be harmed. It can only be changed. And the things that might be changed in a big way from something that the soul liked to something the soul didn't like. and might be changing, but the only way there can be any harm is because of the soul's attachment and delusion. I identify with this body and I'm attached to enjoy it in this certain way, and it's all wrong now. So then there's harm. So you could have a terrible accident and your body is completely changed and you have to deal with it. You can't enjoy the way you did, but at least you can't identify the perpetrator. Or you can have an attack. Somebody has done something terrible to you and it profoundly changed your body or your mind, and then you hate that person or something. But actually, it's because of our attachment and our illusion that there's any harm at all. Because otherwise, nothing can be harmed.
So the point is that with the bull, because he's Yudhisthira, Yamaraj, he's saying that because the ultimate thing is, if you're, like you mentioned the example of Jesus Christ, and he didn't find any fault with even those people that were trying to kill him, which they couldn't. They couldn't kill him. So that is, and then the dilemma that we've been having in this conversation, as far as I can, my observation is that, well, how do you, as a parent, how do you not deal with this in that way? You have to correct your child, this and that. And Pariksit does understand that. That's his role. But as a devotee, when you understand, say someone does something to you, the only concern is that person has damaged their spiritual life. Mm-hmm. But for you, the individual, if you're actually understanding philosophy correctly, I'm receiving mercy. Mm-hmm. And whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, harmful, or whatever, you don't hate the person. You realize this is me. This is what Krishna decided I should receive. Okay, but if you have a position that you have to make sure that things are done lawfully or ethically, and not people being harmed, then you have to enact and decide. Yeah. So I think that's the ultimate thing here, is that it seems to be contradictions, but there's several, like you said in the beginning, there's different layers at work here.
Sometimes we have to...
Because Yudhisthira is the person, I keep saying Yamaraj is the person, and he's the person who makes the judgments on us. Yeah. And he's saying, I can't ascertain.
Yeah, isn't it?
So he's teaching us that as an individual, we shouldn't be going around, it's because that person did this or that. No, it's because I'm here in the material world. Yeah. And my point is to get myself spiritually solid. And get out.
Bringing to the point that you have to be very strictly Krishna conscious, then you can do that. But if you're so much materially involved and you're...
Well, then your job is to get strictly Krishna conscious.
They don't see it like that.
They still have to. We have to do both. We have to play both roles sometimes, in a way. Because we have to know, somebody's behaving incorrectly. Not only might they hurt me, they might hurt somebody else, they're hurting themselves. Society's unbalanced now. It has to be corrected, and this is what has to be corrected. But to know that that's external. And to not be internally, emotionally involved in, that person hurt me, and it's, I'm hurt forever, and all this kind of stuff. So we have to kind of know both levels. We have to know the philosophy really deeply. We have to know, because we do get caught up. Sometimes a thing is overwhelming, and effect is overwhelming. It overwhelms our intelligence, and we actually forget we're spirit souls. This happens a lot. And we forget, and it depends how much overwhelmed we can get stuck. Depends how extreme the event was or something. We can get stuck there and think forever. And we might get sympathy from people who agree, this is a terrible thing that happened. We get stuck. I'm a victim. This happened to me. No, we have to get beyond that and understand that was, it was superficial, and I'm still a spirit soul. I have to move forward. But we have to understand it the right way. We have to clean it up, and we have to do everything right. External levels have to be done in an external right way, and internal has to be understood internally right. Before you, Hardwani, were you putting your hand up?
Well, just this is a tangent, and I'm trying to decide if I should actually ask it or not. But what about when we have yan, but not big yan? What about if we're like talking the talk, but not walking the walk?
Yeah.
How how can that be dealt with, or how should that be valued if someone is saying something and doing something else?
You're talking about you, if
When
you
I
yourself are doing it, or if you see somebody else's?
Well,
You're talking about
both, really. But my dad used to say, and like he would be pretending like he was being facetious, but like he'd say, do what I say, not what I do. So, if somebody is like repeating what Prabhupada said, then that's of course pure. But then if you see that we can say it, but then when it comes to actually putting it into practice, then we fall short. So like, it's a little bit difficult to really, both things, yourself and somebody else value, especially if it's somebody else, value what that person is saying if they're not exemplifying that teaching.
You have to be careful who you judge and how you judge.
No,
Yeah.
I'm just asking for my own, understanding.
Well, that's the
I'm just
understanding.
asking for my own understanding.
I think
How
you just have to
should that be perceived?
then you just have to understand deeply. If there's something that externally has to be tended to, then it externally has to be tended to in the right way. But if it's just something internally, that means you have to understand internally. That person understands Gyan, but doesn't have big Gyan. That person's still covered. And just understand plug it into the philosophy. And if there's something externally that has to be done, because it has to be dealt with, this disturbance of society or something, it can be corrected, then maybe the proper authorities or the proper way, or so there's right ways to do everything, we know that. So, I think I don't know what more to say than that. We just have to understand deeply what's going on, and we have to understand what to do. We have to understand too.
Right.
So we can get it wrong, they can get it wrong, everybody can get it wrong.
Yeah,
So we are struggling.
I've been considering is that my daughter, she's taken these life management seminars, and this may not always be the case, but she said one of the things that she learned there is that if you spot it, you got it. So, if it's disturbing to me that, somebody, and myself as well, talking the talk but not walking the walk, then look within, or the kids will say, if you point a finger at somebody else, how many are you pointing back at yourself? And then another thing that's really helped me recently is that I recalled something, like years ago, my spiritual master came, it was the year of Prabhupada's centennial, and he said that year had been very significant for him because of the extreme focus on Srila Prabhupada, and that he had just come from Nepal where they were doing Namhat programs, and when he saw the people at one particular program, it sounded like, that were so beautiful and rugged looking, like their mountain homes with shining tilak and bright smiles, he was so struck by that experience that the thought came to him, how dear are the devotees to Prabhupada? How dear should they be to me? And so I've really been trying to meditate on that. It's so easy to this person said that, and that person did this, and why can't they? I'm talking about myself, my mentality. But if I can just remind myself that how dear are the devotees to Prabhupada and my own Guru Maharaj, how dear should they be to me? And then, just give it up, because that's an anartha. That's an anartha to be always, looking for, what this person should be doing and what that person should not be doing, instead of focusing on our own shortcomings.
Here's a verse. The verse today, which I think you weren't in when we read it, so this might help too. The king said, "O you who are in the form of a bull, you know the truth of religion, and you are speaking according to the principle that the destination intended for the perpetrator of irreligious acts is also intended for one who identifies the perpetrator. So you are no other than the personality of religion." So that's a good line for you. Whatever destiny they got, if I'm in the same level and pointing my finger at them, then me too. There it is.
And then that word too, the principle. We can, because we've heard from the pure devotee, we can speak about the principle and with authority and with conviction, but we may not have
Yeah.
reach that level of, you know, like
Mhm.
imbibing it and exemplifying it.
So
But
we just
still,
keep thinking about the philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita, how we're not the doer, we're bewildered by false ego, we think we're the doer, the modes are doing most of it else. There's 5 factors of action, we're only one of them. So in chapter 18, so we plug these in, and there's, I'll get to, there's only 3 things in this world. There's only 3 things in this world. Everybody look, there's super soul, there's individual souls, and there's material nature. And when you look at it that way, you sort of step back a little bit, look a little bit higher, and you understand everybody's struggling. Everybody's got illusions, everybody's got attachments, everybody's got some partial understanding and some not. And just understand that, just understand your philosophy. So yes. Okay.
So the victim culture is when we don't apply the philosophy in a correct way or at all,
If we,
or even think of it. And there are there's 2 victims here. There's the victim who's a perpetrator, and there's the victim who's a target.
the perpetrator is sort of a victim of his
They're
own,
going to get it.
his own karma,
They
his
have
own
this.
attachments.
It's called self-inflicted. They're self-inflicted victim. They're going to.
Might have been a victim in the past life too. You didn't
Well,
know
they're
it was
doing
on.
it again.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
we have to apply the philosophy and then realize what goes where and not get stuck.
Yeah,
in
then we
that
get
body,
stuck
mind, soul.
when we have a victim.
And we don't know. We might have been perpetrators in the past.
Could have been perpetrated in the past life. We have a victim culture. I named it. It's my term. I'm not quoting anybody. Then we have a victim culture. If we have sympathy for the victim only, and the victim gets stuck by the effect of the event that has made him forget his intelligence and then forget his identity as a soul, and he's stuck in the feelings of the event. And we have sympathy for that. And we say, yes, it was a very terrible event. And we stick with that. And we don't have a philosophy. Actually, you're a soul. Actually, no harm can be done. It's just illusion. And plus, there's always factors acting on you, karma and modes and everything happening on you and the perpetrator and everything. We don't get philosophy like that. Then we can be stuck in a victim culture.
I have one last thing to say that I'm gone. Here in ISKCON also, it's like all different types of cultural people are here, you know. When you ask for forgiveness or sorry or something like that, every culture is very different, you know, how you do it. That's a big thing too, you know. Some cultures don't give hugs, you know. American culture, they sometimes will hug and feel like there's so much to think about. You almost have to really be so perfect to do the right thing, you know. And if you're offending somebody and then somebody, you know, they're saying something, you have to be so careful and try to do the right thing to amend that situation, you know. And it's very difficult to do that. I find it very extremely odd, you know. And I think sometimes when somebody offends me, I wait for 3-4 days and see how bad and heavy it is, and then choose to forget about it. And that has helped me a lot, you know, because a small thing can turn into a huge thing, you know.
Yeah.
And if you really sit on it for a few days, it's just no big deal. Like that.
Yeah, that's good.
Thank you for your
Okay, one more. Thank you.
wonderful time to talk about.
It's now 8:40. We could have left at any time you wanted to, but
Make that announcement.
discussion. Yes.
It did say 3 or 4 verses ago in the purport that it's the king's duty to, in effect, mete out justice as soon as possible. Not let it linger, for the victim. So that's all, I guess, protection of the community, for the country.
That helps too. It sets things right. You know, if something, if justice isn't happening, then it doesn't help the victim get over it, and because it seems to make the feelings linger.
So,
and then there's fear.
Like policies, procedures, and consequences.
Yeah.
If you never get to the consequence, then people just say to heck with the policy and procedure.
It's hard for us because we aren't always, we know that we aren't always trustworthy judges. And Purush Maharaj knew, and Dharma the Bull knew that Purusha was qualified to be a trustworthy judge and punisher. Well, we know that we are not necessarily qualified to be trustworthy judges. We can get it wrong. We can be attached. We can be clouded vision with emotions, or we can just do the wrong thing. So we're hesitant. So that means we're hesitant so long that justice doesn't happen, and so things don't get set right. So that's another problem that we sometimes have.
So just like it is important, I think, to a corollary to what you're saying, to pray to Krishna to guide and protect us, because he can do that. So it's so much like my tendency, because I'm in such a controlling mode to just think like, oh, I can do it, I can fix it. But no, like you're saying, we're so inadequate even to try to adjudicate something.
Yeah.
So if we pray, really sincerely pray for, there's a few things that we should pray for every day, and that seems like one of them. Another one that I don't do is ask for forgiveness for offenses from the previous day, and then beg for the mercy of the previous acharyas. There's different things that people pray for, but those are, helpful, to me at least. But especially, I always remember to pray, please Krishna, please guide and protect me. And then, he'll do it. He do it. We can't, really do anything on our own.
I personally, I find that, not to knock what you're saying about prayer, or not to diminish Krishna's role, but it seems like when I pray, Krishna guide me, I don't get clear guidance to do the right thing or the wrong thing. I still don't know. So that's why we have Prabhupada and Prabhupada's books, and we have the other Brahmanas. So that's, and of course the spiritual master, but in the ISKCON system, the spiritual master, Diksha Guru is probably far away most of the time. So that means the local, Shiksha Gurus means the local Brahmanas and sadhus and Prabhupada in his books. So then sometimes we get quicker answers.
Guru Sadhu Shastra.
Guru Sadhu Shastra, yeah. So just praying, I can pray and pray. Please give me guidance, please show me. And I'm still guessing in my mind, what is Krishna's guidance?
But that can work together. If you
Yeah,
pray.
it works together. You have to, if you don't pray, that's not very good either. But praying by itself, then I'm guessing what's Krishna's guidance out of my thoughts. So therefore, it means praying. I think praying comes to its practical effects a lot of times through Prabhupada's books and the devotees around.
And remembering.
Yes, the devotees around will sometimes tell you what Krishna is going to tell you, and you hear it from them better than trying to hear it in your own mind, which is full of ideas. Maybe Krishna says this, maybe Krishna says that.
But if you pray like that, and then I understand what you're saying, and I agree. But if you're praying like that, and then you leave yourself open to that guidance, then it's not going to be like, I can only remember one time in my life where I heard Prabhupada say, I gave my mercy to you, can't you give my mercy to others? Because I was crying and praying, and I got the answer like that. But it's not like you're going to get some lightning from the blue.
Yeah.
But if you leave yourself open to that guidance and that direction, then and depending on how receptive you are to it, it can manifest. And I'm not saying I'm some example of that. I'm just saying I know, theoretically that and then I have experienced Krishna's guidance in my life, I think. So I think there has to be just balance, maybe, like what you're saying, and then.
There have been times a few times when I finally asked the right question, and then within 6 hours I find the answer somewhere. So, but many, many, many times I'm asking the questions, maybe not quite perfectly asking yet, and I don't have an answer just poof given to me. But it may come through Prabhupada's books or through, gradually come of the devotees around me.
Like you just hear what you need to hear.
Yeah.
Or, sometimes devotees will just open the Bhagavad Gita, be meditating on something that they need, and there it is.
Yeah, it can happen like that. It can happen real fast if you ask the question the right way. Or if you're still muddling around, it may take one more time. At least that's my experience.
Are you ready for another tangent, or do you have to go? Just really, I don't know, I'll wait till another day.
It's 8:45.
Because this could be like a long discussion.
Yeah.
Something
Wait, actually,
about,
this is
something about chanting the holy name that I'm wondering about. So we can talk another day.
This is, anyway, it's such a super important, the more we're studying this section of the Bhagavatam, it's a super important, really astounding section. Really goes deep. So, anyways, I find it exciting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much, and all glories to Srila Prabhupada, glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Can I do that?